I used to want to stay in a haunted hotel. I used to, by Denadamedacro. Every hotel I stay in, I secretly hope is haunted, and this one seemed promising. I was in New Mexico on a work trip, and my employers were putting me up for a 3-night stay in one of the biggest and best hotels in the city. I checked online and I saw that the hotel used to be a hospital before it was condemned in the 80s and then reopened as a hotel in the 2000s. That was a great sign for its haunting potential. It's not necessarily that I want to see a ghost or whatever. I'm not even sure that I believe in the paranormal, but I've always been open to experiencing a ghoul or two. Not only that, but haunted is usually shorthand for really cool building with lots of history. When I arrived on a comfortable, arid night, I could see that the hotel was certainly cool and wore its history proudly. The hulking copper and tan structure dominated the block it rested on. It looked like the building had willed itself into existence out of a sand dune, and a whole city sprang up in the desert around it. I approached the stairs leading up to the front door, and I discovered something that was disturbingly on brand for a place that was once a former hospital. There was a discarded IV needle laying carelessly on the sidewalk in front of the building. I highly doubted it was a relic from the ancient hospital days and was more likely a junkie who decided to escape from a local hospital, though I don't know where the nearest operational hospital was. Naturally, I snapped a pic. I checked in at the front desk and was ushered up to my room on the 4th floor, delighting in the fanciness of having an old-fashioned bellboy escort me up. The room was smaller than I expected, but still quite lovely. There was a bed, naturally, a little side table, some nice Pueblo-style art, and an ornate mirror on the wall opposite to the bed. I wouldn't have guessed that this used to be a patient room in a hospital, but given the hotel's history, it must have been. It was certainly the right size, plus the Do Not Disturb tag on the doorknob said, "Quarantine, do not disturb." It was fun, the little ways in which the hotel embraced its weird, possibly spooky history. Despite how bad I wanted to explore the little city block around me, I had arrived quite late and I knew that I should probably just get to sleep. I had 2 big work days in front of me, so I cranked up the AC until the room was comfortably to my level of freezing, and I climbed into the enormous bed and quickly fell asleep. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up feeling very weird. At first, it took me a while to figure out I was even awake. I blinked my eyes rapidly, but couldn't seem to get the thin film of gooey sleep off of them. Finally, I could just see well enough to make out the clock. It was 3:03 local time. I was disorientated cognitively, but positively miserable physically. My whole body ached, and I was freezing, and I could feel that my lymph nodes had swollen. Everybody has telltale symptoms when they are capital S sick. Mine has always been that my lymph nodes swell up. If they're swollen enough that I can feel them, then I know I'm good and sick. Some virus has compromised my immune system, and now I need to take action. I didn't have a thermometer on hand, but I just knew that I had a fever too. This was bad. This was a legitimate sickness, and I had no idea how I was going to get through my work obligations tomorrow. Though the idea of moving at all seemed like the worst idea in the world to me, I rolled out of bed and pried open my suitcase, where I had a handful of aspirin contained in a Ziploc bag. I popped 3 into my mouth. I adjusted the temperature on the room to be warmer, and I got back into bed. It seemed impossible that I would ever get back to sleep. I felt so miserable. Somehow, however, I was asleep again within an hour or so. When I woke up the next day, I was delighted to discover that I felt perfectly normal. Not just normal, but great. Nothing feels as good as normal does after a sudden sickness. I assumed that the aspirin must have really done its job and knocked out the sickness. I know they're supposed to only address pain, but it felt like they had thoroughly defeated whatever was inside of me. Following a hotel breakfast of mostly pastries, I took a shuttle out to complete all of my work meetings and activities for the day. I felt fine for the duration of my meetings and conferences. When the evening rolled around, I even got to explore the city like I had wanted to. After partaking in some nightlife, I arrived back at the hotel around midnight and I got into bed. I screwed around on my phone for about a half an hour and then began the process of getting to sleep. I woke up to myself dying, or at least it felt like I was dying. Once again, I could barely see, and even after multiple blinks of my eyes, my eyesight was still blurry. I was frozen solid and also on fire. Sweat accrued on my forehead to the point that it began to drip into my eyes, which only improved my vision. My lymph nodes were golf balls shoved haphazardly into the top of my throat. If my temperature last night was 100 degrees, this must have been 102 or 3 at least. I had no idea what to do. Aspirin was apparently a miracle drug, but how on earth could I muster the strength to get off of the bed and to retrieve it? With great concentration and concerted strength, I fell from my side onto my back to be in a better position to move. When I was on my back, however, I noticed something in the mirror at the foot of the bed. There was a person in my room with me, a red-haired woman wearing white, standing next to my bed. I could barely make her out through the haze of fever and my blurred vision, but I was sure that she was there. She seemed faint and intangible. I couldn't move any further. I was paralyzed. Whether through my shock and fear or through sheer sickness, I don't know. But I couldn't move my head to the right or to the left to even see if there indeed was another human being in the room. I could only observe everything through the mirror at the foot of my bed. I watched as the white-clad figure drew closer to me, bent down, and maneuvered a small object towards my right arm. It wasn't until I felt the sting that I realized that it was a needle. Warmth coursed through my arm, through the rest of my body, and then I passed out. I woke up gasping the next morning, like ODing heroin users do in the movies. I was shivering, but not because I was cold. I could tell right away that I was no longer sick yet again. Did I just experience a fever dream? Why did I have a fever in the first place? And was I really dreaming? Something was clearly horribly wrong here. I was due back on the shuttle and off to another round of work meetings in a couple of hours. Working today felt insurmountable, but I still had to do it. There was just something else that I needed to do first. After another round of breakfast pastries, I approached the front desk of the hotel and politely asked for another room. I told them that I knew that this was a hassle, but I really felt like I must be allergic to something in my current room or something. I explained my feverish episodes the last 2 nights, but naturally downplayed some of the details so that I didn't come across as a lunatic. They said that they'd see what they could do. The day's rounds of meetings and presentations was miserable. All I could think about was whether the hotel would be able to find me another room. If they couldn't, would I have to find another hotel? That seemed like such an expensive hassle over something that had to have some kind of logical explanation. When my workday was over, I booked it back to the hotel and straight to the front desk. Good news. They had found another room for me on the first floor near the back of the building. It seemed as though this room was much more exclusive and pricey. So they must have been startled by my talk of allergens and sickness. The new room was lovely. There was a mahogany bookcase beside the wall, and to my delight, no mirror at the foot of the bed or anywhere else for that matter. Perhaps this was some sort of office or maybe even doctor's quarters in the old hospital. Whatever its original purpose, the room felt like a refuge now, so I declined any opportunities to hit the town once more, and I spent the evening getting some work done and replying to emails. As midnight rolled around, I was hesitant to even go back to sleep at all. This was the last night of my stay, and just pulling an all-nighter sounded appealing, but exhaustion overcame me, and I realized that I would need to get at least a few hours of sleep. Around 1 a.m., I created a little oasis of water, aspirin, and my phone on the nightstand next to me, just in case I needed any of them during an overnight emergency. I settled into the cold bed and I quickly fell asleep. I woke up an hour later and my body burned. It felt as though my heart was pumping thick, molten lava throughout my body instead of life. This time I could open my eyes fully and take in my surroundings. I knew I had a fever again, but that was the least of my concern. I had reached a level of sickness previously unknown to me. My mouth was so dry, which seemed impossible because I was covered in sweat. Each breath was agony, but I took deep, gasping breaths anyway because I was afraid each one would be my last. I was terrified. With all of my strength, I sat up in bed and I reached out to grab my phone to call 911. As I grabbed the phone, an impossibly pale, impossibly white hand placed itself on top of mine, and with little effort, forced my hand and the phone back down. I mustered the last of my strength and I looked up to see who the hand belonged to. It was a woman's face that looked down upon me. Her face appeared to be covered in a thick, pale layer of makeup base. It made it seem as though her features glowed in the dark. Or maybe they just did. Her hair was bright red, and she had dark circles under her eyes. She smiled and removed her hand from mine, and then gently covered my nose and mouth. She smelled like nothing. I gasped for air, and I didn't get enough, and then I passed out. The next morning, I remember a burst of light and sound, machines beeping, people yelling. I could breathe now, but just barely. This was a dream. Another dream. They've all just been dreams. Please tell me they've just been dreams. Wake up, I've got to wake up. I kept muttering that aloud to myself, groggily. The action slowed and my eyes started to make sense of the shapes around me. There were 3 men in the room with me, 2 wearing white coats, 1 wearing scrubs. They were doctors. Buddy, you're awake. God knows how, one of the doctors said. I took in some more of my surroundings as best I could. I was unmistakably in a hospital. I was lying on a gurney, and there were lime green vinyl dividers on my left and right. Next to me was a cart with some medical equipment on it, perhaps a heart monitor. But there wasn't the little lines heads-up display that you see on TV. On the cart was what seemed like dozens of spent gloves and packages for needles, stents, or whatever else they do to you in a hospital. I looked down to see a limp blanket covering my body and a tube protruding past a bandage on my left hand. A doctor with a heavy, carefully maintained beard approached me, sat on a little chair next to me, and placed his hand on either side of my neck, feeling my lymph nodes. "Did you bring anyone with you to the hospital today, Mr.?" he asked me. I didn't. I don't know how I got here. Am I sick? Am I better now?" I stammered. The doctor closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and nodded. "Is there anyone who would want to hurt you?" he asked. "No," I said. "I don't think so." "Do you or anyone else you know have any access to thallium chloride?" No, I don't." "Do you know what thallium chloride is?" "No, I don't." The doctor stood up and crossed his arms, his eyes darting back and forth as though examining me, searching for a lie. "Excuse me for one moment," he said. With a jerk of his head, the doctor motioned his 2 colleagues out of my little cubicle and closed the curtain behind him. Beyond the curtain, I heard the men talking in hushed voices. I could only make out the phrase, "It's her. I'm telling you, it's her." After a couple of minutes, the lead, bearded doctor emerged back through the sheet. "I need you to listen to me. Can you do that?" Yes, I said. "You were very, very, very sick. In fact, if you were here one more night without our care, I think that you might not have made it at all. But you're stable now. You're going to be okay. Do you understand?" "Yes," I said. "Good. Now, I need you to leave." "What?" I gasped. The doctor closed his eyes and held up his hand to quiet me. "No matter what we do, you're not going to be safe here. You're okay now, but to stay okay, you have to leave. Do you have someone who can pick you up?" No, I'm not from here," I said. "Can you get a taxi?" I can get an Uber." "A what? A lift?" I said. Yes, get a lift," the doctor said. "I'm going to leave you here now. I need you to count to 100. And after you do that, I need you to walk out the front door and leave. Can you do that?" "Yes," I said. I was so disorientated and scared that I was willing to comply with such a strange request. Plus, the man wasn't lying. I really did feel okay. Without another word, the doctor retreated back behind the curtain and I counted to 100. As I crawled out of my gurney, I noticed for the first time that I was fully dressed in my usual clothes. Jeans, a button-up shirt, even socks and shoes. It seems weird that they dress me before a hospital stay. I exited my space, expecting to see signs of a bustling hospital all around me, but I appeared to be the only one in this ward. The lights were even turned off. I walked out of the room and down the hall in a daze. I was moving fast towards the exit that somehow I knew exactly where to find. I encountered nobody else on my way out. I found the set of double doors leading to the outside world, and I pushed through them to enter the blistering New Mexico morning. I pulled my phone out of my pocket to order the lift. As I did, I was aware again of the tube protruding from the adhesive on the back of my hand. It was now connected to nothing. Had it always been? Ignoring that for a moment in my disorientation, I opened the app to get my ride. As I prepared to type in the address of the hotel, I saw on the map a little blue dot was hovering right above the hotel I had spent 2.5 tortured nights in. When I turned around towards the doors of the hospital, I discovered that they were the doors of the hotel. Looking inside the small window pane on one of the doors, I could see the hotel lobby. A bellboy carried some bags towards the elevators. I gingerly pulled the needle out of the back of my hand because I couldn't think of anything else to do, and I dropped it on the sidewalk in front of me.